I am taking the liberty of sharing a presentation that I first delivered to the Women in ICT Zimbabwe conference last month. It was a fantastic conference with over 100 women in the room. And I hope that we'll have an event like that in the not too distant future. The question I posed, and the theme of their conference was empowerment, where we've got with empowerment. And the question I posed was, who empowers? And when I first pondered this question, my answer in my own mind was very simple. It was that we empower. We've got to empower ourselves. We can't sit around and hope for other people to do it. But then in my research, I discovered this quote from Professor Claudia Golden in an interview with Melissa Gates from the Gates Foundation. And she says, if you look at the word empowerment, it's got two parts. There's empower, which is to give people control, education, etc. But then there's the meant part, which she said is the community activity. So in fact, to really empower people needs a two-pronged approach, from the person outwards and then from the community inwards. Claudia Golden was the first woman to be awarded a solo Nobel Prize in economics. She was the first woman to receive tenure at Harvard University. So she's quite an important person and quite a clever woman. And she's done a lot of research on women in labor and looked at the gender gaps in pay, etc. Sorry, I'm being very stupid because I should put this into presentation mode. There we go. Can you all see it?
Yes, Moira.
Thanks, Pearl. Okay. So the gender gap at companies may be narrowing, but there's still a lot of daylight. And this comes from a PwC global workforce survey. And they said that with the data to back up, what most women and many men already know at an anecdotal level, men in the workplace are more empowered than women. So this survey that used data rather than just our feelings about it, backed that up. The biggest point of difference are, surprise, surprise, equal compensation. Women really do want to choose when, where, and how to work. Women want to find fulfilling jobs, so they don't just want to have work, and that might, talking to this audience where most of you are in IT anyway, that might seem a bit strange, but remember, a lot of women had jobs and still do have jobs that are more around administration. If you even interrogate the statistics in South Africa and the percentage of women working in IT companies, when you drill down, you find that the largest percentage of them are actually in administrative type of jobs. So we need to have fulfilling jobs. And we also want managers to consider our viewpoints when they're actually making a decision. And those I've listed in order of importance, but all of them got high scores. So money aside, we need to have a data-driven approach rather than just our views, because, as it said, it confirmed what we already know. But once there's data, then you've got an argument. Until then, that's what you think. But with data, you get the real story. Women want flexibility. And one of the things that came out in the report is that we should learn from the pandemic. We actually, overnight, pretty well had to change the way we worked. And there were a lot of lessons from that. Certainly, flexibility has become far more of a thing. But we're still finding that people are going backwards. And the going backwards to, yes, you have to come to the office, yes, you have to work 9 to 5, is not good for women, because we have, for the most part, there are a lot of very, very good dads who do half the work, but for the most part, we're still the ones, if we don't have to do it, we're the ones who have to worry about the children and how they're going to get home from school, etc., etc. So we really need to boost female leadership, and if we can boost female leadership, we'll overcome a lot of those problems, because the more women we have in leadership positions, in ICT in particular, but in the world generally, the more we will overcome all of the issues. And I love this picture, because to me, this is just such an image of a powerful woman. So I then wanted to just look at biases, because biases are really what affect us. And there are two types of bias that I wanted to look at. But first of all, if we just look at what biases are, they're systematic patterns of deviation from the norm, and they're all about rationality. So when we have a bias, we actually often act illogically because we just work from our biases. And there are two biases we really need to look at. The one is confirmation bias, which we know quite well. Confirmation bias is where you believe what you want to believe. So you take the information that supports what you believe. My best example of this is the people who believed in vaccinations for COVID would talk a lot about how they support that belief. And the naysayers, on the other hand, would work very hard to explain why it was bad to be vaccinated. And despite all evidence to the contrary, they would continue in that belief. So that's confirmation bias. And women suffer from that, because there are still a lot of people who will say, yes, but women don't make good managers. Yes, but women don't this. So that confirmation bias, and then they look to find evidence for why they're right. We all do it all the time. It's how we justify a lot of decisions in our lives. And then there's implicit bias, which is really about negative attitude. So it's not a bias that's out there, but it's a bias that's there all the time nonetheless. And you're not usually consciously aware of it, but it's about being biased against gender, race, creed, where people live in the world. And that bias is the harder one to actually fight, because it's not as visible as that. And then the other biases that we know, belief biases, etc. The other thing we need to really look at is mindsets. Mindsets actually frame the running account that takes place in people's heads. And it's a mental attitude or set of opinions that you've formed about something through experience, upbringing, and culture. And your mindset influences everything that you do. And there are two types of mindsets generally. They're growth mindsets and they're fixed mindsets. What I found very interesting in my research about mindsets is that fixed mindsets often occur when parents praise their children for doing well. So when clever kids, when their parents, their teachers, everybody tells them how clever they are, they don't actually see the need to do more. So they get a fixed mindset. An example that I found so interesting from a woman called Carol Dweck, who wrote a book on mindset. She said, if you look at the Enron example, a lot of you are probably too young to remember the Enron disaster when they spilled oil all over the ocean. And it's always explained as a real disaster early in the 2000s, if my memory serves me. But Enron only employed people with very advanced degrees. And it also developed, because these people were all clever people, it developed a culture where you couldn't fail because you had a reputation and the company's image. So it wasn't just you couldn't fail, but the company couldn't fail. They hated to admit mistakes and valued image very highly. And when the investors finally investigated what had gone wrong, they realized that so many of them had fixed mindsets, which led them to be defensive and untruthful. So your mindset is very important, and you don't have to, if you have a fixed mindset, you can move away from it. All you have to do is recognize it. So a growth mindset is the one that you want. And I've just talked to that, but anyway. Then supporting mindsets include curiosity, discernment, adaptability, creativity, humility, gratitude, and comfort with ambiguity. One of the young women in the audience in Zimbabwe asked me to mentor her. And we had our first session earlier this week. And she was interested in the whole humility thing. And it is an interesting concept because the idea of humility is to not be overconfident, or the opposite of humility is hubris, where you think you know everything. But humility doesn't mean always putting yourself down, or doesn't mean you have to defer to people who are more senior than you, or who come from different cultures. Often that's not what humility is. Humility is understanding what you know and what you don't know, what you are not, but it's not going on your knees and saying, please, please, I'm being humble. That's not what humility is. But the most important one really is curiosity, because curiosity opens doors to exploration, learning, and innovation. It's a natural urge to observe, learn, and discover. It's a spark that makes us wonder, question, and seek new experiences. Leaders don't have all the answers, and they really need to cultivate curiosity. All of you in the room must cultivate curiosity in yourselves and everybody around you. Creative thinking, curiosity drives exploration. When we approach problems with a curious mindset, we will probably get better answers. I read something once where the writer said, we're the most curious the day we start school. And you know children are curious. If any of you have little children or have had experience with little children, you'll know that they always say, why? Why? And then when you answer, they say, but why? Because they're curious. I mean, it's, any 3-year-old is fantastically curious. And they continue in that way. And then they go to school and their whys are dismissed because, for obvious reasons, to keep control in the classroom, the teacher can't answer arbitrary questions everywhere. So our curiosity is actually drummed out of us when we start school. It is changing because a lot of the new and revolutionary type of educational approaches don't do that. They actually encourage curiosity. But I would implore you to, if you have young families, encourage their curiosity, even if it drives you crazy, and encourage the curiosity of the people around you. And most of all, cultivate your own curiosity. Love learning. A happy day for me is when at the end of the day I say, I've learned something new today, because that's what makes me happy. Curiosity is about learning things. How does this work? How can I do that? Socrates is an example of someone who really talked a lot about curiosity, saying that wonder is the beginning of wisdom. And Michael Dell, a much more modern example, says curiosity is a key trait of success. So some very clever and important people through the ages have said how important curiosity is. And remember that you're powerful, you're unstoppable, embrace yourself, believe in everything, believe in being a woman. And I said at the beginning of this presentation when I was in Zimbabwe, and I mean it quite sincerely, I'm a proud African woman, and I ask all of you to be proud African women. Be proud of being women. Don't try and be a mini man. Don't try and be like the men, because you don't have to be. I'll be perfectly honest. Earlier in my career, I used to try and be exactly the same as the men. I used to try and behave and act exactly. And then I realized that I shouldn't do that. I was actually doing myself a disservice by doing it. So embrace your own power. Thank you.